days are cooler, nights are warmer, and I put the blame on you. Time moves slow, but my heart beats faster. When these eyes are looking right at you, you give me something to believe in, just what I needed. You're the closest.
Yesterday, we left the show with the phone lines being full of people who wanted to have this conversation, so we'll open them up again. And the question on the table was Vice President Kamala Harris. You know, if it's not Joe Biden, it's Vice President Kamala Harris. And if it's not Vice President Kamala Harris, the Democrats are going to have a larger problem than they even think. But I want to read from Goerge Clooney's op-ed today in the New York Times because he just did a fundraiser. A couple of months ago. He has been 3 weeks ago. Okay. 3 weeks ago, Goerge Clooney hosted a campaign event and did a fundraiser for Joe Biden. Today in the New York Times is an op-ed entitled, "I Love Joe Biden, but we need a new nominee." And he writes, "I'm a lifelong Democrat. I make no apologies for that. I'm proud of what my party represents and what it stands for. As part of my participation in the democratic process and in support of my chosen candidate, I've led some of the biggest fundraisers in my party's history. Barack Obama in 2012, Hillary Clinton in 2016, Joe Biden in 2020. Last month, I co-hosted the single largest fundraiser supporting any Democratic candidate ever for President Biden's reelection. I say all of this only to express how much I believe in this process and how profound I think this moment is. I love Joe Biden. As a senator, as a vice president, and as president, I consider him a friend, and I believe in him, believe in his character, believe in his morals. In the last 4 years, he's won many of the battles he's faced, and the one battle he cannot win in this fight against time, the one battle he cannot win is the fight against time. None of us can. It's devastating to say, but the Joe Biden I was with 3 weeks ago at the fundraiser was not the Joe Big effing deal Biden of 2010. He wasn't even the Joe Biden of 2020. He was the same man we all witnessed at the debate. Was he tired? Yes. A cold? Maybe. But our party leaders need to stop telling us that 51 million people didn't see what we saw. We're all so terrified by the prospect of a second Trump term, and we've opted to ignore every warning sign. The George Stephanopoulos interview only reinforced what we saw the week before. As Democrats, we collectively hold our breath or turn down the volume whenever we see the president, who we respect, walk off Air Force One or walk back to a mic to answer an unscripted question. Is it fair to point these things out? It has to be. This is about age, nothing more, but also nothing that can be reversed. We are going to win in November with this president. On top of that, we are not going to win in November with this president. On top of that, we won't win the House and we're going to lose the Senate. This isn't only my opinion. This is the opinion of every senator, congress member, governor I've spoken with in private, every single one, irrespective of what he or she is saying publicly. We love to talk about how the Republican Party has ceded all power and all the traits that made it so formidable with Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush to a single person who seeks to hold on to the presidency. And yet most of our members of Congress are opting to wait and see if the dam breaks. But the dam has broken. We can put our heads in the sand and pray for a miracle in November, or we can speak the truth. It is disingenuous at best to argue that Democrats have already spoken with their vote and therefore the nomination is settled and done when we just received new and upsetting information. So Goerge Clooney knows something we don't know. That's why I'm reading this, by the way. That's new and upsetting information as well. Top Democrats, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, Nancy Pelosi, and senators, representatives, and other candidates who face losing in November need to ask this president to voluntarily step down. All of the scary stories that we've been told about what would happen next are simply not true. In all likelihood, the money in the Biden-Harris coffers could go to help elect the presidential ticket and other Democrats. The new nominee wouldn't be left off ballot in Ohio. Democrats have a very exciting bench. We don't anoint leaders to fall sway to a cult of personality. Yes, we do. Yes, they do. We vote for a president. We can easily foresee a group of several strong Democrats stepping up, and he's listing Wes Moore at the top, which I find interesting. Before Kamala Harris, he said Wes Moore and Kamala Harris and Gretchen Whitmer and Gavin Newsom and Andy Beshear and J.B. Pritzker and others. Let's agree that the candidates not attack one another, but in the short time we have, focus on what will make this country soar. Then we could go into the Democratic convention next month and figure it out. Thoughts and prayers, Don Calloway. Thoughts and prayers.
I think it's important to make a couple of very clear distinctions. The Biden camp is not the Democratic Party leadership. And that is an important element of this story that has perhaps not been the case with recent Democratic presidents. The Biden camp are the 4, maybe 5 septua and octogenarian dudes. Oh, they're all dudes with the exception of his wife. Dudes who have held him up over the last 50 years of his political career through, count them, three presidential campaigns. Remember, he ran in 1988 and got out because of allegations of plagiarism. Then he ran, of course, in 2008, clean and articulate, called Barack Obama clean and articulate. He somewhat succeeded because he became the vice president. And then, of course, in 2020. So his camp has been his camp for some time. And his camp is not the current leadership of the Democratic Party. So when we're talking about Joe Biden stepping aside, the reality is what we're trying to do is appeal to the leadership of the Democratic Party. Jamie Harrison, Nancy Pelosi, Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, and so on. Tim Walz, the president of the Democratic Governors Association. We are appealing to them to prevail on him to preserve his personal legacy and step aside because we don't think we can win. Right? So these are two different camps, and it's important to understand that power dynamic, right? And so, but the reality is that the decision is solely the president's. Why? Because right now he's our nominee. So one could have asked, I mean, I saw the president, hey, maybe I'm part of the problem, and I'll tell you why. In 2017, when Doug Jones was sworn into the United States Senate after beating an Alabama child molester by the name of Roy Moore, Joe Biden came in and he spoke to that. It was 17, right? So at this point, he's the former vice president. And he's speaking, and I'm listening, and I texted probably 4 or 5 of my partners like, man, Uncle Joe's old, man. He's old, man. And this is 7 years ago, right?
Okay.
So you can't tell me
that race was important. That race was important because it was the thing that gave me fire to know that Party of Lincoln strategy could work, because Doug Jones asked primarily black folk, Democrats, to show up for him against Roy Moore.
He did.
Doug Jones asked.
He did, and we did.
And got and there was another one, not Ted. There was another race that was a Republican race in an open primary state that we also showed up for against somebody that was egregious. So I knew that it could work when we show up, right?
Yes.
To your point.
Absolutely.
To your point. Here's what I thought happened. Joe Biden, when they looked at the map, the only person that could beat Trump in 2020, according to, political operatives like yourself, was Joe Biden. So everybody got behind him, led by our South Carolina brother, Jim Clyburn, said, all right, y'all, knock it off. Step out, step behind. Everybody got in line. Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, Kamala Harris, everybody got behind. Pete Buttigieg. He put a couple of them in the cabinet, made Kamala Harris his vice president with the thought to get through the first round of the things that we needed, from the Build Back Better to the insulin, the medical, going after the pharmaceutical companies, going after the folk that did opioid. Like, there was a lot of things on the agenda. And most of it got done, but it's not finished. And in order to not have it finished, they knew that that Vice President Harris probably couldn't win if he stepped down 2 years in, a year in, and said, I'm resigning. She's now the president. After January 6th, it was about to be something nasty, right? So The conversation was probably, let's get over the hump in November, then I'll step down. And then we can have another possibly 8 years with a really solid vice president for her to get all of the stuff done. But the problem is
Let's be clear about something. Time is time. And time is time. And time is such that, if we're being honest, those two camps I just identified a moment ago, the Biden personal camp and the Democratic Party leadership, they both have unprecedented access to the president. And all of them folk knew a year ago, just like I knew in 2017, something ain't right? And so the proper thing, and I'll say this to the family, this is the audience I care most about in all my media world, and I will tell y'all, the proper thing to do would have been for Joe Biden to step aside 1 year ago and give the Democratic Party a proper primary process to engage in to reach a nominee culminating in the convention a month from now. And now let's go for it and beat Donald Trump. And then, hey, listen, the Democrats are in a constant, I see this every day as a Democratic politician, we are in a constant race to pick the next square-jawed heterosexual white boy to represent our process. And if they're a veteran, even better. This is what we do as Democrats because we're still pining away for this white male who hasn't voted for us since 1960 and John F. Kennedy, right? This is what we do. At least we could have had a proper liberal Hunger Games over the course of the last year to do that. Right. And Joe Biden could have positioned himself in the proper tradition of George Washington and LBJ. I'm stepping aside. I was a transitional president to preserve the peace and preserve democracy. That would have been, in retrospect, the right thing to do. But every politician you know,
why didn't they do that?
Because every politician you know, I'm talking about school board to president, is the most arrogant person you know. Because you have to step outside. To be a politician, you have to step outside of your house, on your block, and look around and say, you know what? I want to be the leader of everything I'm looking at. I'm the guy. I'm the person best positioned to tell everybody I'm looking at what we should be doing. And when you're talking on a presidential level, you're talking about the person who said, I should be the person to be the leader of the free world. Imagine the arrogance in that, right?
Okay.
And that doesn't bode well for somebody to step away.
My days are cooler, nights are warmer, and I put the blame on you. Time moves slow, but my heart beats faster. When these eyes are looking right at you, you give me something to believe in, just what I needed. You're the closest.